Welcome to the Powerhouse Theatre Collaborative's latest Voice of the Actors podcast. For going on more than 5 years now, the nonprofit Powerhouse Community Theatre Company has made the historic Colonial Theatre in downtown Laconia, New Hampshire, its base. In fact, the award-winning Powerhouse is the resident theatre company of the Colonial, which is owned by the City of Laconia. Powerhouse also performs at other locations in the Lakes region. While the Powerhouse community has grown significantly over the past several years, with 7,300 plus audience attendees and 210 participants in 2025 alone, not that many people know how the Colonial is operated behind the scenes and how Powerhouse fits in. Stay with us now as we explore how the Colonial Theatre is managed, owned, and operated. This knowledge is especially relevant as the current city contractor that oversees the theatre complex, schedules and markets live events, and manages ongoing operations. The privately held Spectacle Live of Lexington, Massachusetts, is up for renewal this summer after its first 5-year contract. I'm Dana Gardner, your Voice of the Actors podcast moderator, and I'm a member of the Powerhouse Theatre Collaborative's Board of Directors and a frequent performer and backstage contributor. Please join me now in welcoming our guests today. We're here with Pete Lally, President of Spectacle Live, Brandon Caron, Chief Operating Officer at Spectacle, and Brian Halperin, Powerhouse co-founder. Welcome, gentlemen.
Great to be here. Thank you for having us.
We're glad to have you. Pete, let's start with you. For our listeners' background, please give us a brief history of Spectacle Live, the reach you have, the background of working with the City of Laconia and the Colonial Theatre practice that you've been taking now for over 4 years.
Spectacle Live started in 2013, and it is a company that when I started it, we just started with a relationship with one small venue in Lexington, Mass. I had worked for another venue for many years beforehand and had experience in marketing and promoting and buying shows and so forth, and as a concert promoter, but really wanted to do my own thing. So felt like the timing was right and started that in 2013. And initially we weren't managing different facilities, just renting mostly from the town of Lexington at Cary Memorial Hall, putting on concerts there, and expanded that footprint over the coming years to include venues in Plymouth, Mass. And we did some things on Cape Cod and occasionally some other places. And then in 2018, had the opportunity to get into venue management in addition to promoting shows. And that's when we had the Lowell Auditorium come into our portfolio. And that was a building I had worked at for many years in the past. So that was a familiar place to be back to and to be working with again. And that sort of jumped us off into having the different pieces of the puzzle that we have now. We're event promoters, we're marketers, we do ticketing and production and food and beverage and venue management and kind of all of the 360 degrees of those pieces of the puzzle. And that was going very well up until March of 2020. And you can imagine we had to kind of redo our business plan a little bit then. And so during COVID, we scaled down and made the best of rescheduling and getting through that like everybody else in the business. But one of the things that we were looking forward to doing just prior to all of that was to come and visit the Colonial Theatre. I had a conversation with Mayor Engler, just informational more than anything. In I think 2018, he had called just to learn about how the municipal buildings and just different management structures. And so we had a conversation there. And then there was some outreach from the city to a number of folks, ourselves included, to check out the Colonial as the city was exploring management options. And we were scheduled to do that in mid-March, I think, and that got postponed to mid-June. And eventually had the chance to have some conversations with the city and to learn, to see the venue for the first time. It was under construction. And to begin some conversations with the city about a partnership. That was when we first met Brian and Johanna, and Powerhouse was coming to life. So there was some opportunity there that we had time to explore this opportunity with the Colonial and managing it in partnerships with Powerhouse and the city that we may not have had if it wasn't for cleared schedule, shall we say, during COVID. So that was how the Colonial came into our orbit. Like I said, it was a few years after we started to get into the venue management piece, and really made a nice complement to what we're doing at the time. And it's been a great relationship ever since.
I think what some people don't know about how this all started was when the city put out an RFP, and then COVID hit around the same time, and nobody applied for venue management. And because Johanna and I had been on the city's planning committee for the Colonial, they came to us and said, what could you do? We're opening this thing in a year and we don't have, anybody to run it. What could you do? And we said, well, for no money, the thing we would start is a community theater and build sort of organically depending on how that would go. But, we were a two-person team that was going to have a very hard time running box office and concessions and cleaning and all the things that a venue of that size requires. But until Pete and his team from Spectacle came out of the woodwork, that's what was going to likely happen. And when now Mayor Hosmer at that time said to Johanna and I, okay, we love this community theater idea. We'd love to have, a community anchor being a big part of the Colonial, but, can you bring in bands and can you bring in comedians? And we're like, where will the money come from to that? Somebody has to, risk that money to pay those talented things to come in. And that's when Spectacle appeared. Mayor Hosmer said to me, we want you to sit down with them. They're interested in doing that side of it that you guys, aren't interested or have the ability to do, but they want a community partner. And we were extremely skeptical. Like, this is a for-profit company in Massachusetts. Like, how are we going to work with them? How would they give us any attention or any access to the space? They're just going to, but we all got in a room on opposite sides of a table in masks during COVID. And yeah,
it was Mayor Hosmer's arranged marriage.
Yeah. But when we met with them, we were very impressed with their sincerity of how important they thought it was to have a community element to it, because they're not here full time in the community, and they'd be running the venue full time in the community, but they wanted to make sure that the community would get access to affordable programs and to the options to get on stage at times and use the facility. So yeah, arranged marriage is a good term. But the skepticism we had before we met them was quickly dissuaded by the fact that we felt we could have a good rapport with Spectacle and provide very different things to what they're providing to the community in their use of the venue. So
I think that's a good point, Brian, is that was sort of what we had looked at as the missing pieces that Spectacle wasn't in a position to bring in, and the missing pieces that Powerhouse wasn't in a position to bring in, and how we could fit those things together. And that's really what our niche as a company has been right from the beginning, is we work not exclusively, but mostly with municipally owned buildings. And that's requires a balance. We're, as you mentioned, we're not a nonprofit company, which is a bit of a rare bird at this type of venue. Well, you do have a lot of that when you get to the arena level or large venues in larger cities and so forth. But where we've really found a place for ourselves and opportunities is to work with municipalities such as Laconia. Like I said, we started with Lexington, Mass. Our second venue was in Plymouth, Mass. Both of those being municipally owned. So that's really where we found our niche and our ability to find those balances. We understand that this is not our building. We understand that this is paid for by the taxpayers. It was built by the taxpayers. Its main mission in terms of or one of the main missions of the building being economic impact for the city and the betterment of a downtown, in all of our spaces. So we really get that, and that was why we wanted to have these partnerships, whether it's with Powerhouse or other community organizations. And I think we've done a good job of finding that balance of bringing in national touring acts and also bringing or helping to facilitate those uses that are more community oriented. And that's a really important thing to us. And I think it's worked well for us to be able to find ways to develop a plan to make that happen in the different communities we work in and the different venues that we work in, and understanding that that's particularly important to those that are municipally owned buildings.
All right, so Pete, you've got a lot of different venues, many of which are municipally owned. How does the business model work? How is it different from a large arena, let's say a for-profit in a large city? How do y'all make these the numbers work in order to keep these shows appearing in these municipal auditoriums?
Each one is a little bit different. Each venue is different. Each city is different. But the elements of it are the same in that we've got to figure out a plan that, number one, is sustainable over the long term. What we don't want to do is make promises to a municipality, or in those cases where we work with nonprofit-owned venues, any of them. We don't want to make any promises of sustainability that we can't keep. We want to make sure that we put together a plan where we can sustain ourselves over the long term and not come to a city or town after a year and a half or 2 years and said, hey, we tried and we didn't do it. It just didn't work. And so we understand how those different elements fit together, how the rental business works when we're renting the building to different organizations that use it, how to run food and beverage, how to take advantage of different opportunities to keep costs low and be efficient. It's a very thin margin business. And in addition to that, to understand how to apply the risk that goes into promoting national touring acts. So in those cases, we are, we're running the facility, but we're also putting up a substantial amount of capital at risk on shows to attract national touring acts to come to venues, so that when we have a national touring band coming to the Colonial, we're promising them that they're going to get paid that night, no matter if nobody shows up. That's our risk, and along with the stagehands and the advertising and the insurance and the catering and all the rest that goes into it. So we understand that piece of the business too, and that's what really can kind of make the formula work, is all of those different elements coming together and making sure that we understand how those can be pieced together to make something that is sustainable over the long term.
Mm-hmm. Now you've had some.
I was just going to say, I think some people in the community may not realize that every one of those shows that Spectacle books in is a financial commitment right off the bat, with no guarantee of any return on that investment. So you have to be, opening the doors, you have to be strategic. If you open it too many times with too many outlays, eventually you're no longer in business. And there is a market size to think about, and there's, the capital outlay. All the risk is on Spectacle to, upfront the money to bring in the act and take all the risk if nobody shows up.
Yeah, and that's something where we've put, close to $4 million of our own money at risk on shows over the last number of years that we've been there, in order to these shows don't just show up. We need to be pounding our fist on the table with agents and managers and saying, come to Laconia, here's a check, come show up. It's a very competitive marketplace throughout New England. And we have 4 full-time people in our talent buying department. We have another 6 or 7 in our marketing department. So it's not only about knowing, having relationships with booking agencies and artists and getting on their radar and advocating for a market and a building. But then it's also being confident enough to kind of convert that risk. So if we are taking a risk that amounts to, with all those items I just mentioned, between artist fee and catering and marketing and so forth, it's $40,000 or $50,000 at least, if not more, per night at the Colonial, that we're taking that risk and being confident that we can market it effectively to be able to attract enough people to make those numbers work. It doesn't happen every time. That nobody bats 1,000 in this business, but to do enough shows and as you mentioned, strike the right balance in any given market to make sure that we're bringing in enough shows, but we're not saturating the market, and that we can have momentum and kind of amortize our risk over multiple performances, but not cannibalize and really be confident that we can, 80-85% of the time make the numbers work, and that means that we allow some margin for error that can be made up by the winners. So it's a gamble every time we put a show on sale. But thankfully we've had a lot of support from people that love to come to the theater and see great performances, and that's what makes it work. Whether it's Powerhouse or national touring artists or anything else, that's the key is being able to welcome as many people as possible into the theater.
So you've been doing this for going on 15 years. You've got some efficiencies of scale, working across a variety of different venues. You know and understand the New England market. And so far, for 4.5 years, you've had some impressive results. You've had 352 total events hosted at the Colonial alone, $3.8 million, as you mentioned, total investment in buying these national touring acts, $750,000 total marketing invested just to bring visitors to Laconia. And then another number that jumped out at me from some of the materials on your background is $17.8 million estimated economic impact on downtown Laconia. Can you explain how that number comes out, how you get to $17.8 million in terms of a general economic impact, a positive impact?
Sure, I can give a little bit, and I'd love I'll toss the baton to Brandon as well, who has a real understanding of those elements. There's an organization called the National Independent Venues Association, which was formed during COVID to advocate for those venues that were like us, independent, not owned by big national companies. I started Spectacle in the extra bedroom at my house, and it was just me. And now we're close to 40 full-time and 250 part-timers in 3 different states. So you mentioned that economy of scale. That is definitely a part of the key to be able to do it. But for those types of organizations like us, it's called NEVA, is the acronym, put together some formulation to measure economic impact for venues. And it's a relatively big picture calculation. You can get very deep into the weeds and economic impact calculations and all kinds of things, but this at least serve for some type of a benchmark and some type of a tool. And Brandon, if you want to expand a little bit on NIVA or just kind of their take on it, you have a great understanding of it too.
Yeah. NIVA, it created this economic calculator with Colorado State University, which has a strong arts and entertainment management program. And there's a whole series of factors that they count. But, largely it's designed to, measure the impact downstream. There's the very obvious numbers of 750 people come to a show, but that economic impact is felt much deeper through the community where, restaurants are now busier than they might have been, meaning that they might need to add some extra staff or same for hotel rooms. But also some of the events that come to town don't just operate within the 4 walls of the theater. A prime example, I think, is we partnered with Kirk Minahan to do one of his live shows last year, and it's something that we're bringing back again this June. And, Kirk did a show with us at the theater, but his folks came to town Thursday night. They had a party Friday night at a local bar and restaurant. They did the show, and then Sunday morning they also did a follow-up show at Weirs Beach at one of the establishments there. So, yes, we booked a show and sold 750 tickets. However, those 750 people came to town for 4 days, meals, lodging, doing events at other venues. So being able to spread that wealth around the community, not just to the theater itself, but to all those other, independently and small businesses in town.
And I suppose it should also be recognized that the Colonial as a building, as a facility, was shuttered, was closed for many years, offering very little return in terms of community and economic development. It costs a lot to rehabilitate the Colonial, but what are some of the other benefits in this particular venue? I'm thinking about property values that have gone up, new businesses that have sprung up. We're looking at more traffic, foot traffic, cars, and then, of course, those multiplier effects that you mentioned. How should we think about understanding the economic benefit of the Colonial specifically because it came from basically being a boarded up front to one of the finest venues in the state of New Hampshire?
Yeah,
go ahead, Brandon.
I think that comes in 2 parts. One is the actual project itself, right? I think the Colonial theater space gets all the attention, but that is a mixed use development, right? So there's not only just the theater, but there's been 2 wonderful food and beverage establishments that have opened in the front with Defiant and the candy bar in there, speakeasy in the back. Hope I didn't give away any secrets there on how to get in. But and then also on the second and third floor of the theater, there are residents, market rate residents that bring new people to town to get jobs or spend their money in town. But secondly, as you mentioned there, and we kind of saw it in our involvement in the theaters Pete mentioned earlier, that when we first got to town, the theater was totally dilapidated, and you could kind of feel this downtrodden sense on Main Street. And since it's opened, not solely just because of us, other local people have made investments in their own business, but now there's hardly any empty storefronts. Most of the storefronts that have opened have, repainted the front facades, and you can start to feel a real energy on Main Street with all these local independent businesses that are opening. And then, of course, as that grows, so too does more visitors and more people moving to town, which increases property values, and you start to feel that trickle effect through town. So I think both being a multi-use development as well as sort of its beacon on the 50-yard line of Main Street have really helped to drive that economic rehabilitation.
I think also people forget, the economic side is a really important part of it, and that was one of Ed's Engler's main goals in undertaking this, was to use it as an anchor to revitalize downtown Laconia. And I think there can't be any argument that that's come to fruition. But it's also, I think, a really important source of pride in a community, like that a community like Laconia, New Hampshire, has the most beautiful theater in the state right on its Main Street that's bringing people downtown. Like, it doesn't make sense, right? It shouldn't be that way. I've been in a lot of theaters around the state, and I think it's the most gorgeous one. And it's pleasant to see a show in. It's pleasant to perform in. I think there's an element of, sort of civic ownership of this jewel in the state that people come to Laconia. And I mean, we see this in our participation and the people who come to see our shows for Powerhouse. We have people coming from all over the state because they want to perform with us. And one of the initial draws of that was the Colonial was awesome. And they came and they saw it and they said, wow, I want to be on that stage. And then those people's friends came and saw a show in the Colonial and be like, I want to be on that stage. So it's really been just the venue, the building itself, for its historic importance, for its beauty, is a really positive thing for a community like Laconia.
Yeah, the Colonial Theatre Advisory Board recently reminded the community in a letter to the editor that the goal of the Colonial project was not to generate revenue, but to create a civic auditorium to encourage collaborative business development, cultural energy, and vibrant streets. And so I think to your point, that's happened. But how is the Colonial different if it were a city-owned facility that was somehow profitable or bringing in more money than it cost? Pete, is that unusual, or how do these nonprofit, municipal, and other facilities work? Are they turning a buck?
They're really not. That's sort of the formula that I talked about earlier. It's tricky. It's, these are big buildings. They're expensive to run. The margins are thin on the promoting business or on the rental business, whatever it is. So there is that formula that we're mindful of. And like I said, the most important thing for us is designing something that can be sustainable over the long term and to be realistic about what those goals are. There's a lot of other venues in and around that size. There's the Palace Theatre in Manchester, which is a little bit bigger than the Colonial, but offers some good comp in terms of its dedication to theater and its mix of use and so forth. And that's owned and run by a nonprofit. So that's a different model, but one that also needs some type of support, some outside support. It's not running as a sustainable enterprise just on operating revenue. And that's typical. That's sort of the formula. We work closely with the Merrimack Repertory Theater in Lowell, which is a part of managing. They're under the same roof as we are, different theater and different stage. But theater companies, theaters in general, are not typically in a position to be profitable unless they're in large downtown Boston and so forth. If you look at what Live Nation has just done with building the 5,000 seat MGM theater, they can make that a profitable venture. They have billions of dollars from Wall Street to fund it. They're partnered with the Red Sox. They have 5,000 seats. It's almost a different industry. It is a different industry compared to to what we do and how the types of venues, our venue portfolio ranges in size from about 300 seats to around 3,000. And that's just a different game, and they're in secondary and tertiary markets. So the formula there is something we're experienced with. I've been in that world for 30 years. I understand how the economics of it work and how it doesn't work. It's tricky, but like I said, we've been able to find a niche in making things work with these types of venues. And the other thing about getting back to sort of the venue itself and Laconia, we get contacted by a lot of cities and towns who have the dream to do what Laconia did. And they either have a theater that's closed, they'd like to build a theater, whatever the circumstances may be. And similar to the conversation I had with Mayor Engler back in, I think I said it was 2018, 17, 18, somewhere around there. I have a lot of those calls, and the percentage of municipalities that reach out to just out of curiosity or just looking for some information that actually get any further than that phone call is about 1 in 10, and that get to the place that Laconia did with actually doing it and opening the doors is about 1 in 1,000. So the city should be whoever runs it and however it turns out for the next 100 years, the fact that beautiful theater got restored and not bulldozed like so many other vaudeville theaters of its era have found their fate is a testament to the accomplishment of just how difficult it is to get that far. Right. It just is such a rare thing to make it work. All of the different pieces of the puzzle that have to go into fund it, to restore it, to make it what it is, and as Brian said, to not only do that but make it such a beautiful space is remarkable. So the accomplishment of just getting the doors open is something that is sort of very rare. Like I said, maybe 1 in 1,000, but to be able to now look back on 5.5 years or 5-ish years and to see it sustain and to see it be workable is yet another testament.
So Brandon, how should we think about this? If we were to explain this to your average taxpayer in Laconia who doesn't understand why a bond was floated and monies were raised and this beautiful 1914 facility resurrected, should we think of this as a loss leader? Do we lose money on it in order to make money elsewhere? I mean, I think Bike Week is sort of like that. The city loses money on Bike Week, but it brings money into the region. What is the business model, in a sense, for an organization like the city-owned Colonial?
Yeah, that is the goal of most municipalities in rehabbing these facilities. Again, I think everybody would love for it to be a profitable venture, but that more often than not is not the case. And it is an investment in the future of their communities to create a place of gathering, to create a place that can foster business relationships and create that, economic impact within the community is what so many of these cities and municipalities that actually succeed in renovating their theaters are trying to accomplish.
I think, there was somebody who wrote a letter to the editor that, when we build the middle school, we don't expect to make money on it. We're building the middle school because it's important for our community. And they said the Colonial is not like the middle school, but I think the Colonial is exactly like the middle school. You invest in building something like that, not to see it a return directly, but because it attracts families to be in your community. It attracts workers to want to live there because there's things to do and there's a cultural center. And,
quality of life, right?
And it's an educational facility. I mean, when you go to theater, you go to music, you learn things. I mean, I think we should be thinking of it like the middle school. It's a gem, just like the rehabilitated Laconia Middle School is a sense of pride in the community. I would say the impact that the Colonial had on downtown is greater than the impact that the middle school had, on Laconia and making, spurring business development, spurring investment, and spurring, Laconia as a place for people to want to live and to work and to visit, and gives people a reason to come from all over the state to, people don't come on a Saturday night to go to the middle school, perhaps, but they come on a Saturday night to attend a show at the Colonial. Right. So I think, there is merit in looking at it as an investment on bettering the community that has all sorts of impacts beyond perhaps money being put back into the kitty directly.
Yeah. There's also this concept of the grand list, which is what the sum of all of the property values, commercial and residential, in a city or town adds up to. And Laconia, as well as the Lakes region in general, have seen a tremendous increase in the book value of all of our real estate. Now, this happens to coincide with the 4 or 5 years that the Colonial has been open, but I have to think that there's a relationship there too, that having a gem and bringing in acts and having civic pride and cultural awareness across different types of entertainment and education all adds to that benefit of increasing the grand list. And it could be 18, 20, $50 million. It's hard to put a number to it, but it's the right direction. There's a positive increase in value, a positive increase in the sense of pride and people who want to come here. And that's priceless. If you get into a downward spiral, it's very difficult to pull out. So let's move now to another area, which is, the good news about the Lakes region is that it's a 3-season tourism magnet. The bad news is that it's a 3-season tourism magnet because when that tourism stops, when winter sets in, a lot of businesses suffer and they have a very difficult time managing the busy time in July versus the slow time in February. But it seems to me that the Colonial is a year-round, 365-day-a-year potential venue, and we're getting a lot of business and a lot of activity all year long. And so how is this helping combat the seasonality issue of the Lakes region and Laconia in general? Any thoughts on that, Brandon?
Yeah, no, I definitely, we operate our theaters as year-round facilities, and that's part of that is to be able to drive bed nights and restaurant service during the slowest times of the year. But we accomplish that because of the variability in what we book, right? So the national touring acts, they have their calendars of when they're going to be coming to town or when they're going to be on the road. But, folks such as Powerhouse Theatre or the Putnam Fund, even going as far as Lakes Region Symphony Orchestra and the Community College Bike Week, because we can include so many other people from the local community, we can kind of curate that schedule to be something that's a little bit more year round and be able to create those offerings and give people the opportunity to utilize the theater.
And we're
Oh, go ahead, Pete.
I was going to say, we're also largely not relying on tourists that's not a model that's going to work. For instance, we look at this as a 12-month a year venture. Yes, it's harder to get touring acts into New England in the winter months, but there are some, and we do have some good shows that happen during those winter months. And most of the audiences are local people that are coming, not coming into town on vacation, but that live in the region. And that's a better target for us, a better relationship with the patron to keep them informed about what's coming up. And it's a very hard game to be looking at just reaching people who are coming up for the weekend or coming up for a week in the summer. Glad to have them and love to sell them a ticket to anything they'd like to come see. But that isn't the way that this has worked or would work. A lot of folks coming up are coming up with plans for the weekend already, or traditions that they have over the 4th of July or Bike Week or whatever else. So this is really what we see in our data, our patron data is, yes, we are getting people from far and wide that are coming, but the main support base is people that are coming from a 10 or 15, maybe 20-mile radius in the area.
Pete, that's what I was going to ask before. Can you elaborate a little bit? You were telling me the other day about how many people are in that radius for, a 25-mile radius to your Nashua venue versus Laconia. Because I think sometimes people don't get that, we have an awesome, beautiful theater, but we're in a small market.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that we look at. And as I mentioned earlier, is how do you book appropriate to the market size so that you don't cannibalize other audiences, but you can also find the right balance. So I think that off the top of my head, I think it's around 16,000 people is population of Laconia. When you look at the greater region and we look at our marketing statistics and we're going out 20, 25 miles, we usually look at how far do we have to go from the front door of the theater to find a circle a radius around the theater of 250,000 people. And in Laconia, I think it's around 20 or 25 miles. I could have that close. I haven't looked at it in detail in a bit, but I think that's accurate. When we look at other venues, whether it's Lowell or Nashua or Lexington, population density is obviously greater. So you're talking about a radius of 5, maybe 7 miles to get that. And when you look at a population radius of, or a distance of 10, 15, 20 miles, in some cases, you're getting into the millions very quickly. And that is something where we look at our marketing statistics and say, okay, well, if we're going to have our main audience draw from X number of miles, how do we then properly book the venue to be able to serve that market appropriately so that each of those pieces of risk that we're taking that I mentioned earlier, when we open the doors and guarantee a band that they're going to get X, or a comedian or whatever, they're going to get X, that we're able to draw enough people from that given market to support that level of activity. So yes, I would love to do more shows at the Colonial, and that's something we're always looking for the opportunity to do, is find ways to expand the offerings and build the databases and so on and so forth. But there's also that balance of consideration of, if we're pushing, we could book and double the amount of shows, but we would lose a ton of money and go out of business very quickly. It's just that balance, so that you learn a market, you learn from doing it over, in my case, many decades of buying and marketing shows. But then every market is a new learning process, and finding that balance of, we want to maximize, we're incentivized to maximize the number of bookings that we can put in there successfully. We also put in a lot more offers than there are shows. So we put our hand up for a ton of shows that don't come to Laconia because there's so many venues. Typically, when an artist's agent books them into a venue, that blocks any other opportunities within 60 miles for 180 days. There's some exception to that, and so on and so forth. But for instance, if one of the reasons we do a relatively modest amount of shows in our Lexington, Mass venue is because it's within the Boston radius. So we're designed with the town of Lexington to do a certain amount of shows, which is a fairly modest amount, because we know there's just, you throw a rock and you hit another venue in similar size. So we feel like that's an appropriate approach there. For instance, in Laconia, if a show goes to Manchester or goes to Portsmouth, it's likely not coming to Laconia because of that, what they call a radius clause, and how that all the touring circuit works. The other thing is that oftentimes we'll get calls from, we just got the Wallflowers booked and on sale for a return performance to the Colonial. That was a circumstance where I believe the agent was looking for 3 dates in New England and had 11 offers. So 5 of them were from us. So that's our job as bookers, is to put as many opportunities in front of agents as possible to become as much of the go-to promoter in New England as possible. So in that case, I think the dates went to one in Rhode Island, one in Boston, and then we got the third one up at the Colonial. So it depends on date availability. It depends on what other venues are playing the act. It depends on when they were last in the act. There's a ton of different circumstances that go into it, and we're advocating every day to get as many shows in there as we can do. But it's a very, very competitive game that goes on with bringing acts to any venue.
And I think this is one of the really nice synergies when Mayor Hosmer put us together, is that Powerhouse is filling 5 full weekends a year, plus some special events spread other times. That those are, 15 to 20 nights on weekends of bookings that Spectacle has in the bank that are going to happen, that the community is going to be participating in. So it works for Powerhouse because we get the access to being able to do our shows in the amazing theater, and they get nights filled that are no risk to them because the risk is all on Powerhouse for those nights that we're filling. And, this is a unique kind of partnership. I don't think there are too many other venues. I don't think any of Spectacle's other venues have sort of a home-based group that they can rely on to fill nights with quality productions that, they don't have to be like, yeah, sorry about that. We're putting on good stuff that is filling nights for them, bringing people to buy concessions or seeing the posters up in the lobby for other shows that are coming soon. So it's really been a great synergy, and Mayor Hosmer was smart to put us together, and I think it's been very beneficial for both Powerhouse and Spectacle to have this relationship, and it's not a relationship that Spectacle has at any of its other venues.
Brian, let me drill in down on that a bit. You and Johanna Halper and the other co-founder basically pulled the Powerhouse Theatre Collaborative out of thin air about 5 years ago. How would you have been able to make it as successful as it's been without a venue like the Colonial? It seems to me that you would have had a much harder time being a civic-facing, nonprofit, community-oriented cultural organization.
Absolutely. I mean, like I said in the beginning, the venue was a big draw and people checking us out. And then the quality of our productions was the sort of the glue that kept them there and, allowed that pot to grow. But the access to a space that we could make our home and, people that they'd be coming there regularly for rehearsals. I think people don't realize we're bringing, 40, 50 people to downtown Laconia 3 nights a week, 3 days a week all year long, because our shows go right from one to the other. So our pool expanded very fast, and we were very surprised by the scale of our shows because, we worked in smaller theaters before this at the Winnipesaukee Playhouse, at Hatbox, and that we ballooned so quickly in terms of participation. We've had over 400 people participate in at least one show with us in the 5 years. Mm-hmm. That's a big number. We generally have about 200 people a year participating in at least one show. So it's become a home base, and the Colonial, the people in Powerhouse have a real sense of pride and ownership over the Colonial and really care about it. We work to keep it clean. We help raise money to make improvements to it with our Just Duet fundraiser that we do with Spectacle that's coming up in March. So it's really been a partnership where, Powerhouse grew in synergy to the building. We realized we've had about 29,000 people come to shows, not just at the Colonial, including our shows at other places, in 5 years, and I like that number. I didn't know that we'd be approaching 30,000 people in 5 years that we've served. So
in this market, sure. All right, we're almost out of time, gentlemen. I'd like to go around and ask you all the same question. What is the one thing that you'd like someone, a taxpayer, a resident of Laconia, to know about the Colonial and the relationship with Spectacle that they might not know? Let's start with you, Brandon. What would you tell them that you want them to know about it that they might not already be aware
of? Let's go to Pete and come back to me. I'm thinking on that one.
All right, you can think about it. Pete, what comes to your mind?
I think we've covered a lot of ground of just the different pieces and nuances of it. And I think that there's a legitimate debate in any community as to the role of municipality in owning a venue like this. It's not, it's not a police station, a fire station, a school, et cetera. It's a different piece of the puzzle. And so there's obviously legitimate discussion about those types of topics. But I think that when you look at the Colonial, I think one of the things to focus on is just how successful it's been. And like I said, I think that no matter what direction the city decides to go in, the fact that the city has made it this far, and it should celebrate the restoration of the venue. It should celebrate the impact on downtown, and also to understand the dynamics and the nuances of the industry and how all these pieces fit together. I think that that's the number one thing. There's a lot of great effort. Brian mentioned all the folks who've been a part of Powerhouse. There's also just an incredible team of people who we have as volunteer ushers and staff, whether it be our security, our cleaning staff, our food and beverage staff, and just the passion that those folks have for the building, as do I. Laconia has been an area. I'm born and raised in Massachusetts, but I spent a week in Laconia every summer growing up, and it's a place that I've loved since I think I was 4 or 5 years old. My mother's best friend growing up had a house just a few miles from the theater that we'd spend a week with them every year, and it's been a special place to me for decades, and this theater, seeing its impact on the community and seeing how much people love it and the memories of being there growing up. There's a legitimate debate to be had about costs and impact and all this other stuff, but just it's been an overwhelming success in terms of measuring what's happened with the Colonial compared to so many 99% of other municipalities who set out to do what Laconia has done.
Brandon, I'm sorry to put you on the spot. Let me rephrase the question. Why should the Spectacle get another 5-year contract at the Colonial?
Yeah, I think I'll use a word out of Pete's phrase there, and that's community, right? I think as much as we bring in the shows that, that are concerts, comedy, things that get all the attention in the marquee space, at the end of the day, we're very proud of the part we've put forward of the Colonial being truly community. And that's from everyone who's worked there, largely our venue managers, ushers, security, food and beverage staff. While all of them have great backgrounds and great resumes, they're all from the Lakes region. They're people of the community who work there and bring that passion and energy every day and that connection, as well as all the events that we've hosted. If the weather hadn't had other ideas today, we would have had the Laconia Public Schools in for a concert. We've been able to work with Lakes Region Symphony Orchestra, the Community College, Powerhouse, Bike Week, so many other great local events as well. And I think that's something that I'm most proud of and something that, we would definitely look to not only continue, but to enhance as we move forward, is just that connectivity and that community to make this really feel like part of Laconia and not just a building downtown that does concerts.
Brian, last word. What would you like people in the community to understand about the Colonial and Spectacle that they might not already?
Yeah, I think in a day and age when there's so many forces driving people apart and into their own, silos and echo chambers, a venue like the Colonial is a place where people can come together because they like the same music, or they love musical theater, or they want to see their kids in the play in the concert that would have happened tonight and is happening tomorrow. So a place that is such a beautiful, warm, welcoming place that people can sort of put their differences aside on the outside and just come sit together in a communal experience, enjoying a performance, is a really important thing in this day and age. And I'll just give one example. We did the Diary of Anne Frank this fall, and for the first time, we tried to do a school matinee, and we had over 700 kids and teachers from 3 different school districts in the Lakes region, come into the building to watch a tough show, and especially in this day and age. And so many kids, we overheard them saying, this is what it's like to go to theater. I've never been to something it's like this. It's beautiful. And, for me, who's going to the theater my whole life, it's old hat. But to realize that there are, middle school and high school kids in the Lakes region who've never had an opportunity to see a show in a venue like that, that's all the more reason that we have to keep going and continue this relationship with Powerhouse putting on community programming, Spectacle providing professional management and bringing in the national touring acts, because we reach different audiences in those ways. But providing the space for kids to come in and wonder and say, that's what it's like to be in a theater. I don't find that theater is a divisive thing. I think theater is really a unifying thing and teaches compassion and empathy and how to put yourself in other people's shoes. We need that more than ever. So having venues that will allow you to accomplish that are really important right now.
All right. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. You've been listening to New Hampshire's Powerhouse Theatre Collaborative's latest Voice of the Actors podcast. And we've learned a lot about Powerhouse's home, the Colonial Theatre, and its management company, Spectacle Live. And we've uncovered a lot of detail about how the Colonial operates, how it impacts the community, and what choices the City of Laconia faces when it comes to managing this facility. And so now a big thank you to today's guests. We've been here with Pete Lally, president of Spectacle Live. Thank you, Pete.
Thank you so much.
We've also been here with Brandon Caron, chief operating officer at Spectacle. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate the time.
And Brian Halpern, Powerhouse co-founder. Thanks again, Brian.
Thanks, Dennis. I'll see you at rehearsal.
You bet. Remember, tickets for all community theater events are on sale at the Powerhouse Theatre Collaborative's website, www.powerhouseh.org. And all live events at the Colonial tickets can be purchased at the Colonial Theatre website, as well as at the box office on Main Street. Go to these original sites for your tickets, not overpriced imposters. Also get involved yourself as an actor, behind the scenes, or a supporter of the many upcoming Powerhouse Theatre Productions. Thanks again for listening. Bye until next time.